thank you everyone for being here tonight. I see some familiar faces here who support us at our speaker series events, so thank you for your continuous support and being here today. My name is Charlene Glaw, and I'm going to talk a bit about manifesting and developing greater self-awareness and how they relate to each other. So I'll start off by telling you a bit about myself and a little bit of who I am. So I am actually from Washington State. I moved to Canada about 2 years ago. This is Seattle, which is probably one of the few cities you know of from Washington State. But I'm actually from Blaine, Washington, which is a very, very small town that is pretty much the last port of entry into Canada. So I lived right along the BC border there. So a very small town. So where should I start? So when I was young, I grew up in a pretty religious household. And as I got a little bit older, long story short, I discovered that some of the beliefs just didn't quite resonate with me. And so I spent a lot of my, even as young as my mid-teens, just trying to discover who I am. And my parents were wonderful and beautiful people, very loving. Unfortunately, there was just a bit of a bump of the heads there, so there wasn't really an outlet for me on how to discover who I was because I had to be a certain way. So what that led me to was a bit of rebellion. I wanted to do what I want, how I wanted, when I wanted to. And because I lived in a small town, everybody kind of knew everybody. And I ended up getting in with not really the greatest of crowd and probably didn't make the best of choices either. I moved out when I was about 18 or 19 and got my own place. It was a good time, but it's kind of led me down a path, and I went through some really darker times. I got into my first relationship when I was about 20 years old. That ended up being a emotionally abusive relationship, and that lasted for about a year and a half. And so towards the end it became physical. Fortunately, I was able to get out of that. And so once again, I was on my own, just trying to discover who I am and where I belonged. So of course that led me to down even a darker path. So it was a downward spiral for me when I was in my early 20s. I was still responsible in a sense. I was working, I was doing all kinds of things, but my mind was not there. My mind was not happy. So maybe 21, 22, there was a situation that pretty much knocked some sense into me. And I had to decide then and there that was not where I wanted to be. That was not the place where I needed to be. And so my first realization was that I needed to take better care of my body and my health. And so the first thing I did was join the local gym. And I started to feel good. It gave me a bit of a distraction from the very small town that I lived in where I saw everybody all the time. One day I looked at the board and I saw that they offered Tai Chi classes. Now, I had never done Tai Chi at the time. I did grow up watching Bruce Lee movies, and I still do watch Bruce Lee movies because I do love martial arts. I find it to be beautiful. So needless to say, it became an instant passion of mine, and I began to work very closely with my teacher and Tai Chi master, Gu Chang, in Washington State, and I went on to teaching my own classes. I went and I rented a studio apartment that was built onto her home, so I trained almost every single day. It gave me the first feeling of mindfulness and connecting with something that felt good. And I can probably confidently say that it probably saved my life too, and in the direction that I was going. So at around that time, just kind of jumping up years as I go along, I had got into another relationship. It was very short-lived, but it was long enough that I got pregnant. So I was pregnant, and I have my son now, Zayden, who's wonderful. And so at that point, my life just took another halt, and I had to decide what I wanted to do. The father at the time was not really involved. I was a single mother probably from the day that I found out that I was pregnant. And it's still not involved. In fact, my husband now has adopted my son as his own, which is a beautiful, happy ending there. But what that left me was, again, alone and by myself. My parents were there for me, but it just wasn't the same. It wasn't fulfilling me. So I decided that I felt that another change was supposed to happen. So I had moved on, I had talked to my job that I worked for. I worked for a freight brokerage. I was a dispatcher for about 4 years. And they were opening an office in Central Washington. And they offered me a job to be the head dispatch, one of the head dispatchers there. I talked to my parents. They were also looking for a change, and so we all moved together. And believe it or not, this is Washington State. Not everybody realizes that this exists. But as you pass the mountain passes, you can see the trees in the background. It turns into canyons and desert, and it becomes really dry. So completely different side in Washington. So this is where probably my spiritual journey really began. I remember to this day what it felt like to walk into a grocery store and not see anybody that I knew, not to know anybody. I could just smile because it just felt good. It felt like a new start at the time. So at that point, I had to take some time away from Tai Chi. I was raising my son and going a few years ahead again. He was eventually placed on this autism spectrum. So he was placed on the high functioning spectrum. If you ever met my son, you're very lucky. He's a beautiful ray of sunshine with a whole lot of energy to give. So I was dealing with that, but the great thing is I started to attract some really great people into my life. One day a friend of mine had given me a reading that I am to look into making pyramids, in a nutshell. So I looked into the concept, and I had no idea how I was going to pull it off. I had never worked with resin before, but it was something that was kind of coming to me to do. So I did it, and I still make them, as you can see. I even do build your own pyramid workshops where people can make their own and discover that creative side to them that really exists in all of us. So, why am I here talking about manifesting? One day, my friend had said to me, my best friend, she said, you know, I just don't know how you do it. You have this way of things just kind of working out for you. It's like you're this master manifester. And on my face, I'm smiling because it seemed like a nice thing to say, but in my head, I'm like, I don't think I'm the master of anything. And I still don't, honestly. But I felt that life was a little crazy and chaotic and weird and moving fast, but I was just going with it. So I said, okay, I don't know much about that, but I'll look into it and see what it's all about. I was still new to all the spiritual terminology at the time, and she said, well, I think you should, because you probably should be teaching people this. I said, okay, so I looked into it. And so what I discovered as I started implementing some of the principles, you know, being mindful of your thoughts, your intention, and you know, I was putting those things into practice. But what I noticed is that I was having ups and downs. I was still having those ups and downs. And what I discovered that it was more to it than just my positive thought. And this has really evolved over about 4 years that I've been working on this. It was far more than that. And what it came down to was becoming more self-aware. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about manifesting. What is manifesting, or at least what I found it to be. What is self-awareness by definition, and these are what I call the 4 keys of manifesting. So when I was kind of looking into this whole manifesting thing, I came up with these different things that I was dealing with myself that could potentially help others. So when we're talking about vibration and energy, I think Tesla's a good person to reference here just to start it off. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. To understand the true nature of the universe, one must think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And we, if you believe, as I do, but we are an extension of the universe. I really do believe that. We're a physical extension of the universe. So I do believe those laws apply to us too, as far as vibration and all. So let's keep going here. So what is manifesting? It really is our innate ability to create, which it exists in us. It's what we do. But I think it's just a matter of how to better utilize that creative power that we all have, and how to not allow it to become a burden, because we can manifest good, not so good. I don't like good or bad really, but we can manifest all kinds of vibrations. And sometimes there's hidden impulses, such as our limiting beliefs, that we don't know where they even got planted or when in our life. Our comfort zones, stepping out of those comfort zones, becoming more self-aware, what to do with our emotions. So I think the goal is that we can manifest at higher frequency levels. Okay, so by definition, what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is having a clear perception of your personality, including strengths, weaknesses, thoughts, beliefs, motivations, and emotions. Self-awareness allows you to understand other people, how they perceive you, your attitude, and your response to them in the moment. So when you're doing this self-work, it's not just about you. You begin to understand the different things that exist within you also exist in others, and that we're all on this individual journey discovering ourselves. And when we start working on those different components within us, we see that in others. And what does that do? It helps us to become less judgmental. It helps us to not become so defensive of other people's opinions, because we have them, you have your perceptions, you have your personalities, and you're aware of it. So you've probably heard the statement, my reaction to you is the awareness of me. So recognize, I just put that word there because it really does tie into what I'll talk about going forward, but to recognize how you're feeling. And honestly, in my opinion, there really is no point that I found anyway in this human life that we can reach full ultimate self-awareness. And the reason why is because we're ever evolving. Every phase in our life, we become a new self, a new part of us we get to discover. It's a constant state of evolution. So when you are becoming self-aware, it's not like you have to do work all the time in discovering who you are. It becomes a little, for lack of a better way of saying it, a little bit easier as you go along, a little more second nature, I should say. So I think there is a bit of pressure in the spiritual community that we must evolve faster than we're ready to. Like we have to find our purpose like now. We have to find our gifts like yesterday. And we feel like we need to catch up. I don't really think that's the case. Some of us, it might not be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, But the best part about it is that it's a journey. It's not that you have to be there right now, but to enjoy the journey there. So I don't feel there are any one and dones that way. Okay, so we know our emotions and our feelings manifest physically. They come outward, and they can manifest even within our body as well. And so, not only can emotions manifest themselves physically, but they of course carry a vibration. And I think we as humans have this amazing ability to feel and express our emotions. And I'll be the first one to tell you that it's okay to feel every single emotion and feeling. It's really okay to feel it. That's why they're there. Even the negative ones, the negative thoughts. So we don't want to see those. But you know what? They have a lot to teach us about ourselves and others as well. And so what I usually recommend folks doing is not trying to cover up your negative thoughts or emotions with something positive only for the sake of being positive. What that can do is further suppress the issue, and it will still project outwards. What you can do is you can shift focus. When you become more self-aware, you can notice those things, and you say, okay, I'm feeling a little angry right now, I'm feeling a little sad. Okay, maybe I will do something else. Maybe shift focus and do something that makes you feel good. You're not denying how you feel, and it's okay to feel. So recognizing how we feel. And it's not that we have to analyze every single emotion either. We don't have to pick it apart. We just have to recognize how we feel. And that's going to be different for everyone, and the result of that's going to be different for everyone. So the goal is to lead us to a better understanding of our internal processes so that we can understand ourselves. So this is I'll use an example of a car. Usually the bare minimum of what we think of is we have gas in the car and we turn the key and we drive. That's usually what we think of. Well, let's say we turn the key and the car doesn't start or is having problems. What do? You take it to a mechanic. So a mechanic can take a look. They know what's going on underneath the hood, so they can give you a little bit of some answers, a potential solution, and probably a really hefty bill to take care of it too. So we also have our own spiritual mechanics, right? We have our healers, our therapists, our counselors, our mentors, all of which serve a great purpose to us if we need them. And they can help us understand those internal processes. But what any good healer or practitioner will tell you is to not become dependent on those services. They're there to help you, but you can take that wisdom, that information, and apply it. and become your own mechanic, become your own healer, and your own therapist. And if you do still need a little bit of help, there's no problem in that. You follow your inner guidance. Anything I say, it's that inner guidance that's going to help direct you into a place that is most beneficial. So there's something called emotional intelligence, which is a person with high emotional self-awareness, understands the internal process associated with emotional experiences, and therefore has a greater control over them. So I'm personally not, I'm very much duality kind of gal. I don't feel I ever want to be like fluffy, positive all the time, but I do feel pretty good most of the time. but times that I don't, and I know that's okay. And I know there's a reason for it, and I recognize that. So here's something you can take with you if you are trying to analyze, not analyze too much, but trying to discover a little bit about yourself. You can ask what or how, okay? For instance, what is it that triggers my unhappiness? Job, relationships, etc. What about that conversation with my friend that caused me to become angry? What did you learn about yourself? What was uncomfortable to talk about? What does this suggest about you? How does that person make you feel? What can you learn from it all? And it's not that you have to do this every single time, but when you ask what or how, it keeps you into the present moment instead of asking why. Because to ask the question why can take you out of the present, out of this life even in some cases, and you're somewhere else. So you have this self right now that is looking for some kind of answers. And that's to get your problem-solving wheels turning, just to ask questions, and you'd be surprised where that will lead you. Okay, so Stephen Covey, he has this quote, self-awareness involves deep personal honesty. It comes from asking and answering hard questions. So honesty is key when it comes to self-awareness. So is accountability of yourself too, teach you a lot. So I like to put in a little bit of interactive activity here. So when I usually do this, it's in a workshop where you can be more personal. But does anybody have any questions about emotions or want to share something that relates to them? I can for you, or I can keep talking. It's up to you. Okay, all right. So I know it's a personal thing. I get it. It's okay. So beliefs and comfort zones. I could probably talk all day about beliefs and comfort zones and other elements of the mind. I'll start by telling you a bit about what you see here. So here at the top you have the conscious mind, which operates about 5 to 10% of the time, and it's above surface. So you have control over this part of your mind, and that's essentially what your behavior projects out of. Now the non-visible, which there are other layers to the mind we're not really going to get into, but I'll tell you about the subconscious. That's where your perceptions, your attitudes, values, beliefs, and habits are. And your subconscious is about 90 to 95% active. So why that's so important with manifesting? Because we are driven by subconscious impulses 90 to 95% of the time. And how the subconscious operates, it's not logical or reasoning, it's habitual and automatic, like an automatic car. It shifts your gears for you. It pumps your heart, your heart, it regulates your body temperature, it digests your food, expands your lungs, it tells you left foot, right foot, how to walk. Could you imagine if you had to remember how to drive every day, okay? Think about destinations you drive to all the time. You never have to really think about getting there. It's your subconscious that's driving. Places you've never been, it's, oh God, did I pass the place? Oh geez, oh my goodness, is my GPS right? You know, you're more conscious and logical there. So the same thing applies for your deeply rooted beliefs and habits that you might have developed throughout your life. Does anybody have a habit of crossing your legs? Including myself. Is anybody trying to break that habit because you know it's not good for your blood flow? Are you crossing your legs right now? You have no control over it. It's a habit that you've had for so long. What about, and I'm hoping I'm not the only one this has happened to, but when your light, your power goes out, every room you walk in, you flip the switch. Have you done that? And you don't just do it once, you do it a few times. And you're like, oh geez. Because it's your conscious mind, as creative as it is, which is very creative, it has very little control until we can master that subconscious and replace some of those limiting beliefs, those habits. And so when we do that, we have to kind of relate the subconscious to a computer. So when a computer isn't running, it's running slow, you have to add in new programs. You have to clean out the hard drive, maybe clear off your desktop. I have to do that often, you know, to get it to run smoothly. Same with the subconscious. And it's not as easy. It's not as easy to do. And there are methods out there. There's therapy out there where you can reach into the subconscious and such. But you have to remember, it's receptive through the 5 senses. That's your vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. It remembers through those 5 senses. So something I can give you to take with you when you're practicing affirmations, which is something we would commonly do when we're trying to replace old beliefs that no longer serve us, is to do mirror work, which you've probably heard of this technique before. And this does a couple things. For one, you're looking at yourself, and you have to tell yourself, I love you, you're confident, you're strong, and that's not easy when you're looking right at yourself. At least it wasn't for me. So that tells you then if you truly believe what you're saying versus just reading it from a paper. It tells you. But it also gives you an image. So this is something you continuously practice, right? You have an image your subconscious can see. And some good advice here is to do something that makes you feel good before you practice your affirmation. So if you want to become a good cook, and you don't know really how to cook, find a recipe you know you can probably do. Tell your family, okay, I'm going to cook this. Tell me what you think. Do the best you can. Have a good meal. And then know after everybody's full, oh, that was so great. That was good. And then you go sneak off and go to the mirror and say, I'm a good cook. I can do this. Because you feel it. And if you feel it, your subconscious is like, oh, okay, she feels that. If you don't feel it, it's not logical. It doesn't know good for bad. It doesn't know what's good for you. It just knows your habits. It's a cute frog. Couldn't resist that one. So William James, who is known as the father of American psychology, the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing their inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. Story. Okay, another question, which you don't have to answer if you're not comfortable, or you can ask me questions. What limiting belief is hindering your spiritual growth, or do you have any questions about what I just said? Are you just taking it all in? Yes?
One that comes up for me a lot in readings is self-worth.
Yes.
Asking the question, are they worthy?
Yes. That's good. Good point. And self-worth goes hand in hand with being self-aware, too. Okay, so hopefully something there could help you. So comfort zones, this again ties in with the subconscious. Your comfort zones are also there. So your comfort zones feel pretty good. You feel relaxed there, there's no leaps of faith, there's no risk, and it feels pretty good to be in your comfort zone. And so here we have the comfort zone, right in the center. Again, risk-free, safety, ease, security, things I often do. Now this is what the subconscious stores and helps you respond to your environment. So if you want to grow out of that comfort zone and replace old programs, old comfort zones, challenge yourself. Try something new. Have courage. Take risks. Be brave. Okay? So when you do that, what can you manifest from all this? New places, new opportunities, new habits, new beliefs, strength and creative power, open new doors, new people, friends, self-esteem, confidence, and more courage. And what do those become? Your new comfort zones. When you become comfortable in taking those risks, because you can see the result, you'll see. So again, I can talk about the subconscious all day, but you have to remember there's other factors such as just the environment that you were raised in. Your subconscious is active when you are in your mother's stomach, and it's collecting information of the world around you so you can adapt to the environment in survival mode. So there could be deeply rooted things in there. Not that you have to dig them all out, but when you become more self-aware, you'll recognize them, okay? And the subconscious is very much present moment, whether it happened 10 years ago or yesterday. Okay, Alan Watts, who is probably my all-time favorite philosopher, I think he's a philosopher of the 20th century. By replacing fear of the unknown with curiosity, we open ourselves up to an infinite stream of possibility. We can let fear rule our lives, or we can become childlike with curiosity, pushing our boundaries, leaping out of our comfort zones, and accepting what life puts before us. Okay, another question? Questions from you? Anything on comfort zones, or have you noticed this? You can simply raise your hand if you don't want to speak. Have you noticed how comfort zones can maybe hinder things from moving? Yeah? See some head shaking hands? Yep. Okay, so you have awareness of them now. That's good. Okay. Let's keep moving along here. So action. So usually if I were to do this in a workshop, I would split this up into two parts and separate them by a few months. And the first part would be emotions and beliefs and all that stuff that you're working through and healing. As we become more self-aware, we're aware of what we value. We become aware of what sparks our creative side. You become aware in many, many things. It's not just, oh, I'm doing this self-work because it's all about me, me, me. You know, some people might think that, well, how can you send love and light to the world if you're just focused on me? Well, it's not really about that. What's in here you will see around you, and you can also feel around you, and you'll be able to help others too. So action. So what is action all about? Action is the means by which we experience the manifestation of our ideas and efforts. Okay? So our mind, which is here, it's not here, it's all around us. We have so many ideas. We have so many things we like to do, but they stay there. They need an outlet to come into the physical, right? So again, if you're like me, we are the channels, or if you believe like me, I should say, we are the channels by which the process of manifestation occurs through, because the universe creates through us, and creates us maybe. So again, the universe, if you believe this like I do, wants to conceive of itself. And we are a physical expression of the universe. We can create, we can feel, we can have it, we can do all these things. So you'll notice when you start taking action towards things that feel good, that resonate, you start to see synchronistic happenings around you. You see sequential numbers. You overhear conversations of somebody talking about something that you'd like to do. You'll notice the synchronicity of it. And I feel that's the universe that's like, yeah, cheering you on through all these messages, keeping you going. So it's helpful to look out for those. So reasons we don't take action, okay? Probably the first one is fear, fear of the unknown, fear of failure. So fear of the unknown, really that ties into where we're comfortable, if we're in a comfortable place, we don't want to go out there because we don't know what's going to happen. And my only advice is if you feel the draw to go out there, go out there. It's the worst that can happen, unless you're doing something to endanger your life, then maybe don't. But if you're trying something new, try it. See where it leads you. Same with my pyramids. I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I was making these. No idea that it would lead to this form of art. I never saw myself as a creative person at all. Fear of failure. So failure is such a strong word, but honestly, failure is probably the greatest motivator. It really is. And it's your drive, okay? If something doesn't go according to what you intended or what you planned, then what's the saying? At first you don't succeed, you try again. And you take what didn't work out with you, and you build from there. Let failure become a foundation for you to build on. Quitting before we even start, or setting limitations, that really goes into the conscious mind, because it's very creative and it's really good at creating stories. And if those stories are reinforced by limiting beliefs or comfort zones or anything, it's going to feel true. And you're going to stop yourself from going any further. So try not to set those limitations, or at least recognize if you are. That's a good place to start. Lack of resources or worrying about the hows. Every effort you do will send out ripples into consciousness. And by the laws of causation, cause and effect. So whatever you do will always have an effect. Okay? There is a saying that, what is that saying? I thought I'd remember it when I got here. Oops, went too far. That happiness, pretty much paraphrase, happiness is not always a result of action, but there is no happiness without action. Okay? So lack of self-esteem, or lack of motivation, willpower, lack of self-esteem and confidence really ties into our beliefs that are so deeply rooted in our comfort zones, and also comparing ourselves to others. We'll sometimes do that, especially if we resonate with what they do, but we don't feel we're as good as they are. So just know that's their journey, and you have your own journey, and you cherish your own journey. It's going to be unique to theirs. I just found this picture. I just thought this was really inspiring of fear here. At least I'm assuming that's fear, and just cultivating from it, cultivating courage. So fear has a lot to teach you. Another William James, because I just can't get enough of him. Be not afraid of life. Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact. So if you saw my Manifesting Mondays, which I post on Spiritual Niagara now, every Monday I talked a bit about writing down your ideas, getting all of this up here and channel that through into the physical world. And that is as simple as writing it down. It's now in the physical world. It's out of here and it's here on paper. And I did this almost 5 days a week when I started doing this. And it was really helpful for me because my mind's very busy and I can do multiple things, but I need to sometimes stay focused. So by having my ideas and my goals, even if it was to fold the laundry or something like that, I would set those goals and make sure I accomplished them. And if I didn't, I would move it to the next day and so forth. And maybe some of those ideas won't go anywhere. Maybe one or two will lead you to more ideas. Or maybe you'll have one idea that leads you to something great that you never would have expected. So ideas are like planting seeds. Are there any gardeners here who likes to garden? So you know when you start your seeds and you want to know if they're sprouting, and maybe you just take a little peek into the soil. Yeah, well, you're probably a long-time gardener. But my point is, don't do that with your seeds, by the way, and don't do that with your ideas. They'll sprout under the appropriate conditions. We don't have to go digging up all of our seeds. Okay? And remember, you can only do the best you can with the tools that you have. Okay? And then you advance forward. Okay, so Henry Ford, just short and sweet, nothing is particularly hard if you divide it into small jobs. Okay, so a question point on this portion, or what goals or ideas have come to your mind and will you act upon it? And you can just simply raise your hand if you feel like you're ready to act upon it. Thank you, Rhonda. Okay, all right, so let's keep moving on to pretty much the umbrella of all of this. Okay, I know I maybe just threw a lot out there, but know thyself, which is commonly attributed to Socrates, but it's really found in many ancient sources through philosophy, spirituality, even a bit in science and psychology. There's something really fundamental to our existence to know thyself. So, oops, wrong way. Okay, so just to share some inspiring quotes here, which some of these you've probably heard. To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom, Socrates. Observe all men, thyself the most, Benjamin Franklin. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens, Carl Gustav Jung. Okay, all is within yourself. Know your most inward self and look for what corresponds with it in nature. Ancient Egyptian proverbs. Okay. So when we're taking action and discovering these new avenues that might come our way, it helps to think back to childhood before we had all the conditioning happening to us. Conditioning from our society, from our culture, from our environment, from our parents, from our peers. Layers of conditioning, but we can work through that. We can each individually work through that by becoming more aware of the self. Rediscover that limitless perspective that children have. Children do not fear and judge what piques their interest. Children are passionate and care little of what others think of their passions. Okay, and the little boy who dresses up like a firefighter, he's not thinking, oh geez, my friends are gonna think, I'm only 5 and I'm in a firefighter suit. But in his mind, he is the firefighter. Maybe he grows up to be a firefighter if no one stops him. Okay, so let the child within dance. Another Carl Jung, because he is one of my favorites. What did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes? Herein lies the key to your earthly pursuits. A few minutes, Amanda? That's good? Okay, almost finished. So another question point, what effort can you, and you can just think about these questions, what effort can you make right now that can bring you closer to thyself? Okay, and I already know what's holding you back. Oftentimes it's our own self, right? We hold ourselves back. So here's some advice that I give myself often. Deep down, you know where to lead, take that risk. Okay? Sometimes it helps to get confirmation from the outside, but you have that inner GPS, right? That spiritual GPS that's always guiding you. You can listen. Take accountability of yourself and no more excuses. You don't need anyone's acceptance or approval. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. Okay? You can take those and see where they fit. So when we're talking about our vibration and the people that are around us, that's important because we, of course, pick up on other people's vibration, and they can oftentimes mirror ourselves too. But from one of the father and the founder of psychoanalytics. So before you diagnose yourself with depression or low self-esteem, first make sure you are not, in fact, surrounded by assholes. So, namaste. No. Okay, it's true. And if you are anything like me or had that upbringing where you kind of feel like, you know, just the oddball, the black sheep, I'll give you a different perspective. So know that you are limitless and infinite, okay? It exists in all of you. Okay, I just want to conclude, and I'm almost finished, I promise. Here's what I'd like to you to take with you. Improve relationships with family, friends, and peers. Now, my parents and I, we're okay, as long as religion doesn't come up. But even if it does, I simply say, no, I just don't want to go there. And I smile, and I'm just happy about it. It's okay. And it doesn't go any further. So it's okay to express things like that when you need to. Increase an understanding of self and others, meeting goals and accomplishing them, becoming more in tune with what you value and acting upon them, removing and replacing limiting beliefs and journeying out of those beloved comfort zones. Begin to create a life of conscious design. So when I first made this workshop, it was called We Are All Master Manifestors. It's kind of evolved into create a life of conscious design, becoming more conscious of yourself. And remember that mind is master until we master the mind, or one of my favorite authors who does discuss the mind, James Allen. Mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind. And evermore he takes. The tool of thought and shaping what he wills brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass. All right, thank you. That's all I got.